Hello all, welcome back to the YouTube channel. In today's video, we'll discuss about the activities we have in Azure Data Factory, and I'll be walking you guys through all the type of activities like moving activities, transformation activities, and orchestration activities with like step-by-step explanation of what each activity does. So let's get started with the most basic and fundamental activities like copy activity, which is widely used by and most well-known activity. And you can see um, we already have a small pipeline over here, win-based pipeline. So copy activity is mainly to uh, migrate data from one source to another sink, and you can only change the data format over here. Let's say your data is in uh, CSV format, and here I was able to change that in a Parquet format. So let's go one by one, step by step. Let's see. You can have a name and description. Always provide a description if you're working in a um, in with a company. Always provide and working on a project. Always make sure you provide a description and activity state. Like you can just simply to deactivate this element, you can just click on this. So in timeout, the minimum timeout is like 7 days. The maximum is 7 days and the minimum is 10 minutes, meaning how long it can stay idle and how long it can run until it just stops. For example, after 10 minutes, this gets automatically timed out and stops running. And retries, you can mention how many times you want to retry this, and retry interval, like how many seconds you want to wait before giving a retry. And secure output and secure input are basically uh, your output or input cannot be seen in log files, so only you will be permitted to see like something happened, but you'll never see your data in your log files. So this ensures data security as well. And in the source, we let's click on new. We can just have a multiple sources over here. We can add multiple sources. We can get data from more than 100 sources, and this is where you can also connect on-premises, cloud, and Amazon, everything like for the environment out of Azure and Impala and within Azure and databases and data lakes. So you have more than hundreds of data source to connect, and you can also provide parameters to them. Example, let's say this is one of the source we considered, and as you can see, we are giving the file path in a parameterized way. So initially we want to give a parameters because this is an event driven pipeline, and if we want a particular that fold, I mean dynamically we want to select the new folder and your new file. That is the reason we have to pass by a parameter. If we did not give this, it really does not work the way we want. So coming to here, so at the folder path, so it contains the container and directory, so we only giving that in at a container level. So and again file name will be giving, this will be this will be passed as a dataset parameters. Over here you can find a dataset, whereas if you just click on here, and these are basically pipeline parameters. This is a pipeline parameter, meaning this dataset folder path is provided input via the pipeline parameters, whereas inside this the dataset parameters gets populated using that pipeline parameter, and it populates over here, and that is how you get the file path over here, and it connects. to your source. And compression type, as of now, this is not a compressed file, so you don't have to select anything. But if you want to also select a compressed file, you can also do that over here. And this snappy is for Parquet file and zip, .zip and .tar. And now column delimiter, you can also select a custom delimiter over here if you have any. And row delimiter, like what is the next line by default, slash n is like for the next line and something like that. And encoding, by default it is UTF and UTF-8 encoding. And quotation characters is a double quote or a single quote, so make sure you make that consistently, like don't use interchangeably. At some position you have double quotes and some positions you have single quotes. You might find some discrepancies over here. And what are the escape characters? Like every backslash, it considers a escape character. So first row as a header, so it always considers the first row as a header. So if you remove this, you will get a data without any columns, and the first row, the column data, as a first row, like it considers that as the data. So meaning this doesn't know if it is a really a column or not, so you should make sure that you select this if it is a first row. And in some cases you will only insert the data for an incremental load, in some cases, not in every case. And what is a null value? Is it like none or something like that, or null? You can also mention that in schema. So you can just import the schema for now. Now you have to provide the folder path and folder name, because we are parameterized, like we just giving the inputs as parameterized. To get the schema over here, you can simply provide the parameters and the values over here, like folder path and folder name, and you can just get the schema. And parameters, this is where you define. And to get these parameters, this is where you define them. And for the pipeline parameters, this is where you define for the pipeline parameters. And next, and the source, once you're done creating the dataset, and we have a file path type, like if it is a file path in the data set, or a prefix or wildcard file path or list of files. So you can also filter it by the last modified. And if it is a recursive or not, like process all the files in the input folder and its subfolders recursively, or just the ones in the selected folder. The setting is disabled when a single file is selected. So as of now we are selecting only single file. We are just typing a recursive. Enable partition discovery. So in case we have a partition data where partition by columns or partition by some column, so enable partition discovery in the sense it checks all those partitions and considers it as a single file, and then it process it. And maximum concurrent connections, like the upper limit of concurrent connection established to the data source during the activity run. And skip the line count and additional columns if you have any. And same goes with the sync. And this is the sync data set where you provide, this is the parquet for now. And you can also preserve hierarchy and maximum concurrent connections and the block size. And this is where you get this is where you provide the target location where you want the data to be loaded. And coming back to the mapping, and you can see the input schema and the destination schema. And make sure the parquet, like Parquet does not allow any blank spaces, so based on the use case you will make sure you adjust this mapping in the schema. And this getting settings you can just enable here. You can see the fault tolerance and enable logging and staging. And this has an extra charge and degree of copy. This is the parallelism. So specify the degree of parallelism that data load would use, and data consistency verification, maximum data integration unit. And that's it for this copy activity. And let's move on to the next one. Let's see. First we have copy activity. And Key capability includes schema mapping between source and sink and format conversions and automatic parallelism and supports for large data movement and integration with self-hosted integration runtime for on-premises data. So in a previous video we discussed like what a self-hosted integration runtime is, and now delete activity. Delete activity removes files or folders from a data stores. It is commonly used for cleaning up the old data, removing temporary staging files, and deleting the processed files in ingestion pipelines. So here you can see the delete activity, and you provide us just a source, and over there it just simply deletes whatever. And again, these are this same configuration over here, same timeout, retry, and everything is follows the same meaning, just like in the copy activity. And logging settings, you can enable logging to track like happening how this is happening. So here you can also store the logging files, and you can mention the folder path and everything. And here you can just delete recursively if you have multiple files or a single file, and maximum concurrent corrections also you can connections also you can mention over here. And next, staging is an intermediate storage layer used by ADF during copy operation when the source and destination formats are not directly compatible. ADF writes temporary data into the staging location, often Azure Blob or ADS, before loading it into the final sync. So this is like an imaginary intermediate storage layer where you won't be configuring right now, and the mapping tab is used to define. This is also you found it in within the copy activity, and also this partitioning also we found it in copy activity. And performance tuning, like how increasing parallel copy threads and adjusting batch size and dataset bulk loads and using staging for compatible formats, and selecting on required columns using optimized sync, and ensuring source system can handle parallel load. So now coming to transformation activities of data flow, we if you consider the data flow, so you can see multiple activities over here, like you can create a join, conditional split, and in join you can provide the stream name, description, left stream and right stream, like what is the left source and what is the right source, and join type. And also you can just create a fuzzy mapping join based on similar of column values only applicable for string type column, so it only supposes string type. And join condition, what is the condition, and optimization, you can also use a broadcast enabled, and partition options, and single partition or set partitioning, or use current partitioning. And inspection, you can also see the left columns and right columns over here, and this is how you can just see a sample data preview. And conditional split, so in conditional split we have output stream name, description, and incoming stream, and split on the first matching condition. And on after providing us condition, it splits the data. And you can see like after splitting you can also configure that. And again you have a partition options over here, inspect, and again data. So moving back over here, conditional split routes the data into multiple streams based on the conditions, similar to case or if else logics. It works similar to the case and if else. And select just you also have a select over here. Select just, these are the basic SQL commands, where you can just use it using in a no code fashion. So all these lookup and all this union exist, and conditional split and aggregations and all. In aggregations you can see you can consider the incoming, you can just attach this, and you can just say group by column, or you can just aggregate based on some expression. So exists, check whether a row exists or not. So row modify, like you can also filter, sort, alter row, assert, and formatters. You can just flatten or parse or stringify them, or you can just also like rank. You have a rank over here. You can just provide the rank column you want to do it, and sort condition, like at what is it, a ascending or a descending based on that particular column. And you also have a derived column over here, meaning new columns or modifies existing ones using some particular explanation. Like you can just create your own user defined custom columns, so meaning that you can create that. And we also have a data flow clustering execution model, meaning on a it runs on a Spark environment under the hood. So ADF automatically provisions the scales and manages the Spark cluster. You can also configure the cluster type and compute size and time to live setting to reduce the startup time. And coming to orchestration activities, you have again execute pipeline for each lookup and get metadata, set variable, append variable, filter, switch, wait, validation, web activity, store procedure, fail, success control. So now let's see. So over here you can find all of them, like append variable. It just adds a new variable to an array, and you can also execute a pipeline under a certain condition. Like after this, okay, you run a copy activity and then you want to execute another pipeline. Let's say you created a another pipeline where you want to store it in another target or do another processing. You can also do that, and this is to execute SSIS packages. And in the execution pipeline, it's very straightforward. You can just provide uh, the pipeline configuration. Since this is the only pipeline we have, we cannot give itself to execute again. And get metadata is to get a metadata of a data set, and it outputs whatever the basic details of that particular data set, like the file size, like last modified date, and the child items. It's useful for validation and dynamic pipeline logic. And you also have a lookup. You have, let me just, you also have lookup, and meaning lookup retries a single row or a data set from a source, and often used to get configuration values, table lists, or dynamic parameters. Meaning you can just here you can just say that, for example, you have a list of tables, and you can just say that lookup for tables with a particular name or something like that, and you can only process them. And store procedure, you if you have a store procedure script, and you can also provide using this settings, and you just link to that particular service, and you just give that store procedure name. And here you can also provide a script and set variable where assigns a value to the pipeline variable, or example, you can just use this, like for example, if you want to set a particular variable to the pipeline, but for now we are giving the pipeline variable via the trigger. But usually if you want to set another variable, you can just use set variable. And validation, you have validation also, like validation checks like file access, like file size and row count. If validation fails, and the pipeline can stop early based on that, like without foreign, because each one has its own timeout time. If the validation fails, it straight away stops saving the time and computation. And you also have a web activity over here. Let's say if you wanna uh, refresh Power BI, you can just provide the URL and all the credentials, and you can just do that over here. And it's basically used for calling the REST APIs, and you can use to trigger APIs, like integrate with logic apps or refresh Power BI, just like I said, like refresh Power BI datasets. So this is where you can find, like you can or invoke external services and store procedures, execute store procedures in SQL based systems, useful for strategic logic. Let's say when I say like store procedure, meaning on premise, let's say you have an on premises data and you have a stored procedure over there. So after a particular run, and you can just trigger that stored procedure, and so you can make changes in your on-prem for something like that. You can also use in that way, or you can just create a stored procedure in a such a way that it just changes Azure SQL, something data in Azure SQL, something like that. So you can use stored procedure activity in in such ways. And you also have wait over here, meaning to wait. Let's say you are pulling a data from a particular API and you want to wait for certain time until if it is, or you want to wait at another at a state of your pipeline, you can use this. And you can also add machine learning pipelines and Power Query, and like and you have until and switch and all these conditions, filter and for each meaning if you have a list of files and you want to run a pipeline for all of those files, you can add, for example, you have a for each over here and you want to run a copy activity, then you should add a copy activity over here. In that case, it only runs whatever it within this group. So then you can add whatever you want the next part to be, because once the data is copied for each, so you have the data set over here. And if required, you can also combine with a script, and as an output after this step, you can use your further processes, further transformation or processes. And is it a sequential or batch counted items and activities? As of now, you have the copy activity. You can also make changes over here. Let's get rid of this. You have a switch and if condition and also filter. So you can also provide the items and conditions, something like, oh, filter based on the size, and then you can, in using that, you can orchestrate your pipelines over there. So to understand more about these, it's better to build different projects and different pipelines using each of them, because definition wise it is simply to understand, because just by looking at it we can simply guess what the activities does. Like this basically deletes something, or this is a script where we can run, and this is a store procedure we can run. And we can uh, using a simple knowledge we can just guess what it is easily do. But the real task over here is, it's not just learning, but it's more than just simply dragging and dropping, because you have to configure it, you have to make sure it has the proper permissions. So all these, only by doing the projects we can easily understand. And in the Synapse you can also have Synapse notebooks, and Data Explorer, you can also add Azure Data Explorer, and functions you can add, like you can just on the occurrence of some kind of like an event or something, then you can just run based on the run a simple Azure function over here. And I also have a batch service and Databricks notebook. So this is one that is widely used. You can just add a Databricks notebook over here, and always make sure like you provide a proper connections, I mean proper permissions to everything, like for ADF to have that Databricks like access, Databricks access and all that. Yeah, that's it for this video for now, and see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.